Imagine you're walking alone down a remote trail. No phone, no police, no GPS. No one knows where you are. Then, up ahead, you see another person. Today, that moment might barely register. You might nod, say hello, and keep moving. But if this happened 10,000 years ago, that single encounter could determine whether you lived or disappeared without a trace. We often picture ancient people living in small, isolated communities, surrounded by familiar faces. But the reality was far more complicated. Hunters traveled beyond their usual territories. Nomadic groups followed migrating herds across vast landscapes. Families searched for new water sources. And sometimes, completely different worlds collided without warning. The question is, what happened when they did? Did they welcome each other? Did they run? Or did they attack first and ask questions later? The answer is far more surprising than most people realize. Picture yourself as a hunter-gatherer thousands of years ago. You belong to a group of maybe 20 or 30 people. That's your entire world. These are the people who share food with you, help raise your children, protect you from predators, keep you alive when times get hard. Beyond that circle lies the unknown. And in the ancient world, the unknown was often dangerous. A stranger could bring disease. They could threaten your hunting grounds. They could lead an entire group into territory your people depended on for survival. One wrong decision didn't just put you at risk. It could endanger everyone you cared about. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Archaeological evidence shows that ancient people didn't only fight strangers. They also traded with them. And that creates a fascinating paradox. Researchers have discovered obsidian, seashells, pigments, and other valuable materials hundreds, sometimes even thousands of miles from their original sources. Think about what that means. A spear point crafted from a rare volcanic stone might have passed through dozens of different communities before reaching its final owner. That kind of exchange doesn't happen in a world where everyone immediately attacks outsiders. At least sometimes, strangers chose cooperation over conflict. But how do two groups of people who speak different languages meet without turning the encounter into a disaster? This is where human ingenuity begins to shine. Many ancient societies developed rituals specifically designed for meeting outsiders. Instead of rushing toward each other, they kept their distance. Instead of raising weapons, they lowered them. Instead of speaking immediately, they relied on gestures and body language. Some anthropologists believe that many modern greetings may trace their origins back to these ancient survival strategies. Think about something as simple as showing your empty hands. That gesture sends a powerful message. I'm not carrying a weapon. Even a handshake carries deeper meaning than most of us realize. When you shake someone's hand, you're allowing a stranger to enter a distance close enough to harm you. It seems ordinary today, but in the ancient world, it represented a remarkable act of trust. Trust wasn't automatic. It had to be earned. And often it was built one careful step at a time. Yet an even bigger problem remained. What happened when strangers weren't simply travelers? What if they came from a group running out of food? What if drought had devastated their homeland? What if they were desperate enough to do whatever it took to survive? Suddenly, every encounter became a gamble. Imagine two groups arriving at the same river during a harsh dry season. The water isn't enough for everyone. If they share it, both groups may suffer. If they fight for it, one group may disappear entirely. Situations like this likely played out countless times throughout human history, and in some cases, the evidence is still visible today. Ancient skeletons discovered around the world bear signs of arrow wounds, crushed skulls, and injuries caused by violent conflict between groups. But what's remarkable is that during those same periods, we also find evidence of trade, intermarriage, and cultural exchange. Humans feared strangers, but they also needed them. Without contact between groups, communities became isolated. Without exchange, technologies spread more slowly. Without unexpected encounters, many ideas might have died where they were born. Every time two distant groups spotted each other across a valley, a forest, or an open plain, they faced a choice. a choice between fear and opportunity, a choice between violence and cooperation, and sometimes that choice shaped the future of entire societies. But then archaeologists uncovered something even more astonishing. In certain ancient cultures, strangers weren't merely tolerated. They were treated as sacred guests. Why would people living in a dangerous world create rules that protected complete outsiders? And what if harming a stranger wasn't just considered wrong, but an offense against the gods themselves? The idea sounds almost impossible. Why would a community struggling to survive risk welcoming a complete stranger? Yet across the ancient world, versions of this rule appeared again and again. In some cultures, a traveler arriving at your settlement wasn't immediately treated as a threat. They were offered food, shelter, water, protection. Only afterward would questions be asked. At first glance, this seems reckless. Imagine opening your home to someone whose intentions you know nothing about. Most modern people would hesitate. Ancient people had even more reason to be cautious. So why do it? Because they understood something that survival eventually taught every human society. One day you might be the stranger. Picture a hunter separated from his group during a storm. A trader injured hundreds of miles from home. A family forced to flee drought, famine, or conflict. In a world without hospitals, governments, or emergency services, survival often depended on the kindness of people you had never met before. Hospitality wasn't just generosity. It was insurance. By treating outsiders well, communities created a culture in which their own members might receive the same treatment when fate placed them in danger. But hospitality was only the beginning. Over time, stranger encounters became one of the most powerful engines of human progress. Consider this. Every major innovation in human history started somewhere. A better spear design, a new hunting technique, a more effective way to start a fire, the first experiments with farming, the earliest forms of metalworking. If these ideas remained trapped within a single community, their impact would have been limited. Instead, they spread. And they spread because strangers met strangers. Imagine standing at a gathering place thousands of years ago. People have traveled from distant valleys, coastlines, forests, and mountains. They speak different languages, wear different clothing, follow different traditions, yet they exchange goods, stories, techniques, and knowledge. What looks like a simple meeting is actually something much bigger. It's a transfer of information. And information can be more valuable than food. A new tool might improve hunting success for generations. A new farming method might feed hundreds of people. A single idea carried by one traveler could transform an entire society. In many ways, strangers helped build civilization itself. But not every encounter ended peacefully. Human history is also filled with fear, and fear can spread just as quickly as trust. When resources became scarce, strangers were often the first to be blamed. When disease appeared, outsiders became convenient suspects. When conflict erupted, unfamiliar faces could suddenly become enemies. This tension never disappeared. The same human instinct that encouraged cooperation also encouraged suspicion. Both instincts evolved for a reason. Trusting everyone could be fatal. Trusting no one could be equally disastrous. The challenge was finding the balance. And perhaps that was one of humanity's greatest achievements. Not agriculture, not cities, not even technology, but the ability to decide, over and over again, whether another human being represented danger or opportunity. Think about how extraordinary that is. For tens of thousands of years, our ancestors repeatedly faced situations with no clear answer. The person approaching from the horizon might kill you, or save your life. They might steal your resources, or bring knowledge that changes your future forever. There was no way to know in advance. Yet somehow, enough people chose cooperation often enough for human societies to grow larger and more connected. Because every trade route, every alliance, every shared technology, and every cultural exchange began with a simple moment. Two strangers meeting, and deciding what happened next. Today, we live in a world connected by airplanes, satellites, and the internet. We interact with people from different cultures every day. Yet the emotions are surprisingly familiar. Curiosity, suspicion, hope, fear. The same feelings our ancestors experienced when they saw an unfamiliar figure appear on the horizon. In that sense, we haven't changed nearly as much as we like to think. The story of strangers is really the story of humanity itself. A species constantly caught between caution and curiosity, between protecting what it has and discovering what lies beyond. And perhaps that's the deeper lesson hidden within these ancient encounters. Human civilization was not built solely by families, tribes, or kingdoms. It was built by moments of uncertainty. Moments when someone looked at a complete stranger and made a choice. A choice to share rather than fight, to listen rather than flee, to see possibility where fear would have been easier. Because every friend was once a stranger. Every ally was once unknown. And every great leap forward in human history began when two worlds met. And neither one turned away.